Well, I think most of you already know Ed Tatro, and a longtime researcher, my good friend, and you can read his considerable resume on our program of all the things he's done and been involved with. He's a passionate researcher, great with his stories, and he's always ready for those. He's going to have some for me tonight, and he's breaking new ground tonight, and in terms of some things that we haven't really looked at too much, and I think you're going to enjoy this. But I'd like to bring out my good friend, Ed Tatro. Give him a good hand. Sure.
The microphone's low.
We'll get.
We're old and deaf. What are you saying there, Gary? Roscoe, who?
All right, Ed. You want to? You do the honors, man. That's too low, right?
Booga booga. I don't know. Is it better? I'm louder, but I don't know. Is it better? Nobody's answering. They're all deaf.
Right. That's pretty close.
Okay, let's see. I got to put the right glasses on. All right. Oh, there's people out there. Well, those are the wrong ones. Right? Okay. Here we go. All right. Let me set this up. This is difficult because it took 6 months to put this thing together. I haven't quite typed out all the footnotes yet. I got them printed, but I haven't written them out. I typed them out. And good luck to S.T. Patrick, because it's 95 pages long of text. And, you know, let's see how smoothly I can do this. It's going to be a little tricky jumping around here. Let me start off by thanking a few people. I want to thank Phil Nelson, who's my friend. I want to thank a guy that helps me incredibly up back at home in Boston, Jonathan Burak. He might be on Zoom, so hello, Jonathan, thank you. My friend Rick Russo, who knows as much about the medical evidence as anybody on the planet, even though he's a well-kept secret. That's because his philosophy is stay in your house, and that was before COVID. Stay in your house and don't talk to civilians. Only talk to people who are here who know what they're talking about. He's talking to a couple of people, Sarah Peterson and Katana Zachary. He says, my God, they know what I'm talking about. But for the most part, he figures it's a waste of time talking to civilians. I disagree with him because I think we have to plant seeds, leave a legacy of truth, promote critical thinking, and some Pyrrhic victories every once in a while. After we did the guilty men, several hundred people went down to the LBJ library and said, burn this place to the ground. Well, they didn't burn it to the ground, but at least they went down there and had the right thought. So give them credit for that. Pyrrhic victories. And I'll finish with one more thing before I get down to the business here, and that is I saw a little comic strip once, a little drawing, and it showed a little emaciated mouse standing on a mountaintop, and there was a giant menacing eagle, full, widespread eagled wings, menacing face coming right for him with the talons out. And that mouse stood there and gave him the finger. I am that mouse. And some of you are too. Can we put this up? Because I feel like I'm the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Did you just push it up? I was at one place where it kept going down. My voice was loud enough that I was actually pushing the microphone down with my vocal cords. Okay. I called this, David Denton, I don't know, half a year ago said that his favorite word that I use when I'm really annoyed with somebody is they're insufferable. So I called this an outsider's look at the insufferable Leon Jaworski, and it's a tribute to him. I also should thank David Denton for setting us all up. Okay, so let's give it a try here. And let me get rid of this. People are quiet. All right. Let's see what we got here. Most people know Leon Jaworski. John Judge is the one who sarcastically used it. He said that Leon Jaworski, especially during Watergate, was the most trusted man in America. So let's go through this here. And I'm going to start off with just an overview. First of all, I should tell you that he was a fanatic Jesus freak. It was God and Jesus all the time. He promoted it. And he always said it was, he didn't do it that much, but he did it in all his books. Very preachy. And the fourth book, Crossroads, is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It's all right to do that if you practice what you preach. But you better practice what you preach, because there are three really intolerant creeps in the world: Jewish Nazis, homophobic homosexuals, and hypocritical Christians. You can't get much worse than that, and he's the latter. Let me read this little thing here. Regardless of the crime and regardless of the decade in which it was committed, with Leon Jaworski central to the investigation, the modus operandi remained the same. Cover up, don't make waves, avoid digging too deeply, protect the powers in control, and find one easy target, hopefully in an apparent open and shut slam dunk case, prosecute and convict the charged defendant. That way justice appeals to prevail, but the criminal underbelly of corruption maintains its amoral course. And that's what he did in 44, 64, 74, 77, and a whole lot of years down in Texas as a banker and fraudulent corporation leader. So that's what I'm going to try to cover as best I can in the time I have. And I really haven't had a chance to review all this, so bear with me. And it's been 2.5 years, right? I'm a little rusty. So I know I'm a teacher, but even I can get rusty. He started out, he became a lawyer at age 19. He was brilliant, precocious lad. And he started off defending prohibition moonshiners and bootleggers. And that led him to wildcat oil men. And as one writer put it, he said, he built a successful practice from the wallets of a goodly share of perfect clients, men with lots of money who made lots of mistakes. In particular, Houston was crawling with wildcat oil men who learned to trust Jaworski's courtroom skills whenever they broke something, like a contract or another oil man's jaw. And so that's where he got his place there. Now, his attitude was, this is what he said about himself: all I could see was a big unknown, and yet something beckoned in that unknown, a glimmer of a larger vista of opportunities and new challenges, a frontier town sparked by the go-getting wildcatters and pioneering oilmen who had succeeded the oil land cattle barons. Isn't that flowery? Huh? What bullshit. Okay. From there, and then here we go, the powers of God through Jesus Christ and his guiding hand was felt in my severest travails on matters I am now prepared to acknowledge to the Lord's glory. And it's just loaded with that stuff all the time, okay? He makes references to communion and the sacraments of the Last Supper and God's commandments. Without a continuing and vital relationship with our Lord, we become a spiritual vacuum, and evil loves a spiritual vacuum. Oh, aren't you inspired? Okay. As I say in one point in here, you don't need a shovel, you need a backhoe. All right? Now, when he's interviewed, you get to see a little bit something else. And he was a short man, so we got a Napoleon complex going on top of it. And one of the things I'll get to, it's here, right here, he was making $200,000 a year way back when I was making $6. Working over the Suez Canal. People say, geez, he's a lot like George Carlin. Well, George was making millions, and I was working over the Suez Canal. Anyway, he claimed to Texas Monthly he made way below $5 million. Okay? And as I'm going to talk about later on here, he denigrates the hell out of Marguerite Oswald as a money grubber. She was a poverty-stricken woman who was heartbroken. Her son had been murdered. She was unattractive, rude, abrasive as hell, and she knew what she was talking about. And this clown was ripping the crap out of her. And what was he wearing? Alligator shoes. Some Christian. Okay? Some Christian. All right. With that in mind, and even after he successfully got rid of Richard Nixon, the great hero, and then he went on tour, like 180 dates, all honorariums. So he was bringing in money hand and fists, okay? All right. Meanwhile, when LBJ created the War on Poverty, he said it was he was on the board of the War on Poverty. And the first thing he said is, it's illogical to have poor people on the board. Yeah, why would you want one of them? How could they help? Unbelievable. And then he took on Ralph Nader. He was against the Consumer Protection Bill. Quite the Christian. All right. He said, I got a guy here, and this is a Christian pastor who said this, religious types who are allegedly devoted to Jesus but do not act accordingly, simply Jesus fans. He concludes they are fans who have worn the mask for so long they have fooled even themselves. I think he had Leon in mind. And then one writer wrote, for the fact is that Jaworski has succeeded in living two contradictory lives. The first as a public prosecutor, the second as a big-time lawyer, banker, and corporate heavyweight. And each time he shuttles back and forth, Jaworski must reconcile one life with the other. So the guy was living a hernia. Yeah, he's hernia man. He became the major lawyer and director of the Addison Clayton Company. And this is one of the world's largest trader of cotton and other agricultural commodities. And then they started to do hostile takeovers. They took over Gerber baby food, and they took over all kinds of places in Brazil, and they took over chiffon margarine and 7 Seas dressing, and they were pretty much controlling countries in South America. And he's at the middle of it. In fact, one group called the NACLA, Latin America and Empire Report, called this company a modern-day Frankenstein. And I can go on and on with all the thieving that they're doing at the banking and financial levels, but we just don't have the time. This is going to be published in Garrison magazine in the next issue that's coming out. I have 2 articles in the one that's just came out, uncharacteristically, one about Edgar Allan Poe, who was murdered, and one about Wait Until Dark, which I think is the most brilliant movie ever made. So I did teach science fiction, mystery, and horror. You know, I remember talking to Malcolm Blunt once, and he's saying, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? I said, well, I'm teaching science fiction, mystery, and horror, satire and comedy, creative writing, the poetry of rock and roll, subliminal messages in advertising, backward messages in music. Yeah, I said, I'm a sports fan. I got 2 grandsons. He looked at me and said, oh, that's right, you have a life. So anyway, let's see, where do we go from here? When he took over some of these boards, he was the director of 3 banks. I don't know if we need to name them all. And what he started doing is he was filling the boards with vacancies of his friends and other lawyers he could trust. And he started controlling all these banks. And in 1969, Congress put a tax reform law in preventing what he was doing. You know, so it gives you an idea, a brilliant man, but a conniving SOB. The most persistent criticism of his law firm, Fulbright Crooker, perfect, huh? Crooker. I hadn't thought of that. Most persistent criticisms of Fulbright Crooker involve its alleged ruthlessness and disregard for the customary rules governing conflict of interest. One lawyer in another major Houston firm said, they don't see a conflict of interest ever. Another lawyer in private practice said, there is a constant feeling of impropriety about the firm. Conflict of interest is not a term often heard around here. And then they tried to steal the money from a family, Andro, Androw. They were heirs to millions, and they tried some finagling the Bank of Southwest, and the Andros took Jaworski's firm to court, and Jaworski's firm lost $9 million judgment in a Louisiana court. It's the quotes that I think are most insightful from insiders, people down there who work with these people. Texas judges and lawyers, assured of anonymity, offered their candid assessments to trusted sources. Jaworski goes where the money goes. Jaworski won't rock the boat. Jaworski's respect for power is too great to permit him to be aggressive. Okay? I do want to find the beauty. Anyone who knows him knows that he struts sitting down. That's hard to beat that. Damn. Of course, he might have been standing and they thought he was sitting down. Anyway. That reminds me, we're always talking about political correctness, and people don't believe in freedom of speech anymore. They believe in freedom of my speech. I used to say this. George Bush was involved in the Bay of Pigs. He was involved in the Kennedy assassination. He was involved in Watergate. His son and he were involved in savings and loan fraud. He's involved in the Iran-Contra affair. His other son's involved in 9/11, and Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with that crap. It was Cheney and Rumsfeld and Pentagon people and Bush, right? And how did Bush get in trouble? He told the world he hated broccoli. And the mothers went apeshit. And the vegetable people said, my kids won't eat vegetables, you jerk. And if we can't get the President of the United States to be allowed to talk about broccoli, how the hell is he going to talk about anything sensitive? Then Clinton got up there and they asked him whether he wear boxers or briefs. He said, well, sometimes they wear boxers, sometimes they wear briefs. I'm surprised he didn't say he wore them both at the same time. So we don't really believe in that. I remember one time my wife jokingly said, I said this to David Neal today. My wife said, Kennedy was shot by a little midget in the trunk. And I said, that's impossible. The bubble top was in there. And she said, he was disguised as a bubble top. And how do you get in trouble for saying that? Because you can't use the word midget anymore. Well, sorry. I've never been known for my diplomacy, right, Casey? I've never been tactful. Anyway, and I'm sure glad I'm not teaching anymore, because I'd be on CNN and Fox, both of them, within a week. And there'd be burning crosses on my lawn. Anyway, so hopefully I'm safe here. I am going on Zoom, though. Anyway, another great quote. The main objection I have is his holier-than-thou attitude. Jaworski goes around sermonizing like he's above it all when he and the other members of his law firm have done all the same things everybody else does. Okay? And then this is a quote by a French novelist. Man is not who he thinks he is what he hides. Yeah. I guess we're all guilty of that. Don't let anybody know what we do, right? Anyway, we're now ready to move. So that's a kind of an overview of him in Texas. Obviously, he's a wheeler dealer, and they're finagling with laws, and I'm sure almost everything he does is legal because he knows the fine lines, and then, of course, they have to change the laws because he's found a loophole and they have to correct it. But anyway, we got to move on now. We're going to go to World War II, and I wasn't even around, okay? And I just found this amazing, absolutely amazing. So let's go through it here. He became a judge advocate, which meant he was a prosecutor in the military, and he was assigned to prosecute criminals, if you will, or men charged with crimes in World War II in America at prisoner of war camps. That was his focus, and he went everywhere. And his goal was, he knew he was a Texas lawyer, and to get all these West Point boys, academic, affluent people, and he wanted to prosecute Nazi war criminals in Germany. And so what he had to do was he had to win as many of these prisoner of war cases as he could to impress the Pentagon. He knew they were watching him. He even wrote letters to his wife. They're watching me. I got to nail as many of these bastards as I can, okay, so I can move into bigger and better things. And boy, did he do it. Now, I've got 3 cases. I'm going to go through as quickly as I can. The last one is absolutely incredible. There's a whole book written about it, but, Americans don't read and very few people know about it. Am I sinking again? Stay. All right. In 1944, some 18,000 soldiers were convicted by general courts-martials. Men with Jaworski's trial skills were offered all the work they could handle. A lot of bad crap going on. And in one instance, at Camp Claiborne in Louisiana, 3 black soldiers were accused of raping a 20-year-old white woman. The soldiers claimed they had paid the woman for sex and that their liaison had been consensual. The defense team included future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, representing the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and the prosecutor was Jaworski. That's in the appeals court case. Before that happened, they had a court case. Now this is the Deep South, black soldiers, white woman, good luck, okay? And there was only limited information about it, but there was an article, and I had 1 page, and it was written by a Thomas Ward, a New York history professor, and I was able to find his email address, and he was gracious enough to send me the whole damn article. And so I was able to, get all the details. And they are awful, absolutely awful. Let me quote him. In the light of Southern white hysteria over protecting our women, the accusation of rape alone was often tantamount to a death sentence, either at the hands of a mob or through the Jim Crow system. These 3 soldiers were threatened with being lynched, being thrown out to the mob or to the KKK. The 3 soldiers were held without bail in solitary confinement following their arrest. NAACP investigators later reported that the men were confined in straitjackets for as long as 3 weeks, prohibited from contacting family, denied counsel, and regularly threatened. They couldn't afford lawyers, so 3 white lawyers were appointed to defend them. The 3 white lawyers knew they would be screwed, and they didn't want to defend them. Not that they had anything against the 3 black guys, but they knew their careers were done. One of them was going to run for sheriff. He said, I'm going to lose if I defend one of these guys. So that gives you an idea how bad it was down there. Okay, and there were no black jurors involved. I think there were 3 on the original 100 or whatever, and they never made it. So that gives you an idea. At any rate, they were found guilty, and they were going to be hanged. One doctor had checked the woman out and said, there was evidence of sexual activity, but no evidence of rape. Well, that should have maybe done the trick. And then Jaworski comes in the appeals. What happened was they appealed because I guess the law was, in order to be prosecuted properly in a federal court, the feds were required by the U.S. Code to file notice with the state's governor, which hadn't been done. So Thurgood Marshall was able, on that technicality, to have an appeal. And that's when Jaworski comes in as the prosecutor. Now, you got 3 black guys. The woman has no evidence of being raped. During this appeals thing, they find out she's got gonorrhea. They don't have any. This is not some saintly woman who, is involved here. Now, if you're a decent prosecutor, you plea bargain this thing. You come up with some kind of compromise. No, not Jaworski. He wants to go to Germany. So he's going to go get these boys. And I can use that term the way it would have been used down there. Okay, so, and here's an interesting quote. During World War II, 4 times as many black soldiers were executed as a result of courts-martials than were white soldiers, despite the fact that blacks only made up 10% of the U.S. military during the war. Okay. At any rate, the convictions were upheld, but because of that, even during the second trial, if you will, Jaworski won, but Franklin Roosevelt had just commuted their sentences on a clemency thing, and they got 12 years at first, and then by 1947 they were all released on parole. But it's pretty clear that they were railroaded. So that's Jaworski number 1. Okay, Jaworski number 2 was a different camp. Hold on for a second. Gotta try to stay neat. Let's see. Oh, and one of the 3 soldiers had been in a mental institution. He was feeble-minded. So, Jaworski the Christian is going to take care of the feeble-minded guy. There's that easy target, right? Okay, great. So now we move into the second case, and it involves a Camp Tonkawa, I think it's Oklahoma. And what happens here, this one I can go through quickly, it's German prisoners of war, and there's one, a Corporal Kunze, K-U-N-Z-E, who doesn't want to have anything to do with Hitler's mentality or anything anymore. He wants to, serve his time, whatever happens here, and kind of move into America. And the other Nazi soldiers didn't like him for his changing, and they saw some notes he had been writing, and there's a question of, I saw the notes, there didn't seem to be anything of significance there, but they believed he was a spy on them. So they killed him. They beat the living crap out of him. They beat him to death. And it would appear, based upon, there's a book written about that too, and it appears that at least 20 or more beat him to death. But Jaworski went after 5 who pretty much said, we did it, we think he was a spy, and so he just went after the 5. He didn't try to pursue any others. He went for the easy mark, and those 5 were hanged. It's the third one that's really unbelievable. Let's see if I can find it here. I wrote this. I think it's pretty effective here. The last one is in Seattle, Washington. And I guess the best way to do it is just read this paragraph. There's a book by Jack Hayman, H-A-M-A-N-N, called On American Soil. And we're going to go through it. The guy's a patriot. The guy's a hero. He did here what we do, okay? A brief synopsis of the Nightmare Saga involves a contingency of white American soldiers and military police in a supervisory role, a group of black American soldiers housed in a segregated area of the camp's barracks, and another section bearing Italian prisoners of war with extensive access of freedom to the post exchange, the service club, the theater, the chapel, and even some field trips. Add to the mix racial and wartime tension, plus young women adjacent to the base and totally incompetent leadership, and all that comes to mind is the sarcastic axiom, what could go wrong? Right? Well, at any rate, one black soldier, he's got a few too many drinks in him, and some German guy says something to him, and he takes a swing at him and doesn't hit him, and the German guy just nails him one punch and knocks him cold. Next thing you know, these black soldiers come running into the Italian barracks and beat the living crap out of these Italians, which they've been wanting to do for months. And because the Italians are getting to the canteen before the white soldiers, and the white soldiers are pissed, and they're trying to egg the black soldiers on, and the whole thing is just one big mess, okay? One of the soldiers, like a lieutenant or something, calls the captain of the place and says, we got a problem down here. He said, well, can you handle it? He said, well, yeah, I guess so. He said, okay. He went back to bed. He didn't even go down. The army finds out about it. They prevent the press from writing anything about it. They shut them down. They put out a release, minor skirmish. It's a one-day thing. There's never been any trouble before, only minor injuries. One guy is clinging to his life. 3 of them have fractured skulls. 2 of them have knife wounds. So the army at the higher level is just covering it up immediately. They don't want anyone to know anything about it. And of course, the fact that Italian prisoners of war, this becomes an international thing. You can't even take care of our prisoners of, so it's a mess. It's a real mess. Meanwhile, while all that's going on, up on the obstacle course in the dark, an Italian prisoner of war is hanged dead. Imagine censoring all the Seattle daily newspapers were censored. Stop cold. All right, can I go now? Yep, go ahead. Okay. Let me read this to you. For starters, some inaccurate comments should be corrected quickly. The body of the Italian soldier, Guglielmo Olivato, who was found on the camp's obstacle course, was most assuredly the victim of murder. They suggested it was a suicide. Heyman, the author, described the scene as follows. Strung between two massive maples above a trickling creek, a pair of steel cables stretched above a third. Suspended from the lowest cable was a thin rope tautly strangling the limp body of a dead man. Okay, so we have that. So now you have to have an investigation. They bring in Brigadier General Elliot D. Cook, Chief of the Overseas Inspection Division in the Office of the Inspector General. And this guy is a stand-up general. Honest, tried and true, the real deal, the opposite of Jaworski. Okay? He investigates it, and he finds out it's unbelievable. There's blood everywhere. They got all these guys wounded. There are windows and chairs and tables all broken, blood everywhere. The MPs, and they're not happy with the Italians either, they collect everything, and they collect all these weapons, hatchets, axes, bricks, and they just put them in a pile. Nobody identifies who had what. They have fingerprint equipment, but they don't use it. So in the end, they have no idea who did what to anyone in that whole massacre. Meanwhile, up on the hill, they don't take photos of the body. They don't take photos of the thing. They don't take photos of footprints or possible tire tracks or anything. The next day, the captain continues the obstacle course, and they run amok up the hill and down the hill. Anything there is tainted and destroyed. The only thing that was there, the guy was barefooted, and there were 2 footprints in front of his body where the toes pointing towards the body. And like 3 days later, one of them said, we better cover that. It might be important. They put a piece of cardboard over it. By the time, and then everybody starts lying about where they were and who did what. And a lot of them didn't like each other. There were black soldiers who were very, very articulate and educated. 2 in particular, Luther Larkin and a guy, Herx. They were bright. And there were others that weren't as bright and didn't like them for it, jealous of them. So you got hidden agendas, and they start blaming. They say, well, they're the ones that started it. They were the ringleaders. And then this Cook was proving, well, you're lying. That isn't, because we got 3 guys who are saying they weren't the ringleaders. So he's got a mess. When Cook's finished his investigation, and I don't know, it's like 160 witnesses and hundreds of pages, this report, if I can find it here. Oh, by the way, there was a Dr. John Walker on call, and he said that body was lifted up. It's a murder. It's not a suicide. It was lifted up. Okay. And there was a unique kind of splice knot used on the rope. And it couldn't be done quickly, and it had to be done by somebody who really knows what they're doing. And of course, Cook is saying, why, they're beating the shit out of each other with bricks and knives. Why would you take all the time to hang a guy in some time-consuming thing? It didn't make sense that the black guys had done it. Okay? Anyway, Cook makes up this report, I got the numbers, the statistics here somewhere, and Cook said his attitude to his underlings was, there's no way a prosecutor is going to be able to prosecute anyone on this because there's no evidence. You're not going to know who was just looking to the thing and who participated, and you have no evidence at all about what happened to that poor guy up on the hill. And then in comes Jaworski. That's not going to stop Jaworski. He takes all these guys who are making all these accusations. He finds out that this guy doesn't like that guy. One of them accuses one guy, and Jaworski charges that guy, and he wasn't even on the camp. He was with another guy and a woman shacked up in a hotel, and he had to let him go. But I mean, that shows you how poorly he was pursuing this. He ended up with 12 people he figured he could use as witnesses, but he only used 5. Some of these guys are fanatic fascists. In other words, there were no saints here. Absolutely no saints at all. Didn't bother him. Now, Elliot Cook's investigation, this massive thing, was classified top secret. But Jaworski got it. And the defense attorneys, the two defense attorneys for the military, didn't get it. And they were told it was classified not only for them, but for Jaworski too. So when the trial takes place, and a guy gets up on stand and lies, and Jaworski knows he's lying because he isn't saying what he said to Cook, he knows it's a lie, so he's committing subornation of perjury, and the two defense attorneys don't know it's a lie because they don't have the report. Which is incredible. The Christian prosecutor, he's just perverting the whole constitutional law of justice on poor black guys. Okay, and he's charging 43 of them. And he's charging 3 of them with first-degree murder. How the hell charge 3 guys with first-degree murder? And, you know, you don't even know have any evidence at all. His point was, well, they're the ringleaders over here, which he hadn't proven, so we're going to charge them with first-degree murder over there anyway. And who's doing the jury? 11 white military generals and guys. I mean, the whole thing's a scam. Okay? At any rate, Luther Larkin, and you can tell from, I'm going to read a letter he wrote home. I guess you've seen it in the papers already. It's a lie because they know we didn't do what they are trying us for. 2 other soldiers and I are being accused of the hanging of an Italian prisoner of war. We are going to be court-martialed and can expect nothing less than life imprisonment or death, all for a crime we did not commit. I feel so helpless in this frame-up, and I know nothing at all about it. You see now why I haven't written you in so long. This is to his aunt. I've been so downhearted, I haven't written home, and I'm not going to write to Mother anymore until I get out of this dirty situation, if that is possible. The fact remains that we are not guilty, and whether or not the truth will have any effect on our jurors or not is yet to be seen. We feel at the mercy of these people who, it seems, will do what they want with us. I know, however, God will make someone suffer for the injustice that is being done us here. That's an intelligent man. That's articulate writing. That's not, oh, the mother, but, you know, it's not a loser. And what's Jaworski saying? How's this? This is Jaworski. The earnest lawyer often enters a case with the zeal of a missionary. Truth and protection are the fish he peddles. I wouldn't try a prisoner of war nor any accused without the conviction that he was guilty. I just wouldn't do it. I either had the goods on him or else I wouldn't try it. That's in one of his books. What a turd. What a little turd. Okay, and I haven't even gotten anywhere yet. Any rate, now, his 4th book of memoirs, which comes out in, I don't know, 1979, so we're talking 44, 54, 64, 74, we're talking 35 years later, he puts out his 4th book, and he wrote one sentence about this court case. After the violence, one prisoner was found hanging from a barracks rafter, which is incorrect. It was never established whether he had been murdered or committed suicide in terror. Others were severely cut and beaten. And now he's saying the guy might have been committed suicide. Yet he charged 3 men with first-degree murder 35 years earlier. How the hell can he write that? You know, we're not talking about an idiot here. We're talking about an intelligent man who got his law license at age 19. Okay. The trial, 13 were acquitted. The others were found guilty of various charges of assault. They all got a variety of different years, all dishonorably discharged. And the 3 murder charges, it had to be unanimous for first-degree murder. They got 6 of them to find them guilty of manslaughter. So the defense attorneys felt, you know, that's a Pyrrhic victory. We at least, they're not going to get hanged, and that kind of thing. And then, you know, eventually they found out that Jaworski had the file and they didn't. They went crazy, absolutely crazy. But the military generals went along with Jaworski on any contentious thing, any argument. They just sided with Jaworski on everything. I'm going to quote Jonathan Swift from Gulliver's Travels. There was a society of men among us, bred up from their youth in the art of proving, by words multiplied for the purpose, that white is black and black is white, according as they are paid. To this society, all the rest of the people are slaves. He's talking about lawyers. Okay. Let me see where we go from there. Here's another one from in his second book. I traveled across the country to other commands at their request to serve as trial judge advocate. In the Army at that time, the position compared to that of a prosecutor, except that of the trial judge advocate, was sworn to divulge all the facts in his possession, no matter which side was helped. Well, he didn't do that. He wrote it in his book, but he didn't practice it, okay? At any rate, they found out, they went nuts. And then in the closing arguments, when the defense attorney said, this is a disgrace, I've never seen anything worse in my life like this. And then on top of it, they had a suspect list that had been done in a lineup, and that was missing. And if you can believe it, the rope disappeared. The rope disappeared. Okay. And any rate, here's Jaworski at the end. I call it the how dare you speech. The Army made a mistake. The Army erred when it placed POWs next to colored soldiers. They're saying the whole thing was stupid. You can't put these people like this to run amok. And Jaworski's saying, oh, the Warren Commission would never lie. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court would never lie, even if he put thousands of Japanese people in the internment camps in California. Okay. Anyway, so once it was over, basically, he won. Again, we had Harry Truman had clemencies, Christmas clemencies, and I guess by 1948, everybody was free. But they were dishonorably discharged. Their lives were ruined, okay? And then, of course, shortly after the trial, Leon Jaworski was assigned by the Pentagon to go to Germany and prosecute Nazi war crimes. He got what he wanted. Anyway, this couple that found out all this, first of all, everything I just told you was classified for decades. And finally, they declassified it. And this couple went to the National Archives, found the stuff after months and months, and brought it to a Republican and a Democrat in Congress who agreed. Imagine that. And they went to the Army and said, this is a disgrace. And the Army agreed, and they rescinded all the guilty things, and they all got honorable discharges, and almost all of them were dead. And they said, and we'll pay them what they lost during the time they should have been, still in the Army. And one 83-year-old said, I've been waiting for this, exoneration for my whole life. And they sent him a check for $725. And as the church lady would say, isn't that special? Okay. Then we find out who's he associating with in World War II. And, I could go on for hours here, but this is a case of you are judged by the company you keep. So who is he closely aligned with in World War II? Allen Dulles, Operation Paperclip. John McCloy, Operation Paperclip. Putting the Japanese in internment camps. Not bombing Auschwitz, which cost 500,000 Jews their lives. Robert Story, Nuremberg lawyer, close friend of Leon Jaworski. Now we're talking also about fake passports by the Red Cross sending thousands to Argentina. Lyndon Johnson, part of Paperclip as well, and of course that phony Silver Star business, which I think I'll write an article about anyway. He's supposed to have been in an air battle, and none of it took place. None of it took place. And Ronnie Duggar did a great article on that, and Ronnie and I were friends for a while. That was one of those things when they attacked the guilty men, and Robert Dallek said, why didn't they come to me? Why didn't they come to Ronnie Duggar? Well, Ronnie Duggar did come to me and said, yeah, I know Johnson's guilty. Dallek, what a mouthpiece. Anyway, Henry Gonzalez, who's involved in the laundering of college clothes, he's part of Paperclip. And so all these guys, they're all associated with each other, and we bring them all back in '64. Mae Brussel was right. And there's legitimacy to what you're talking about, Scorzini and Alan Kent and all that, because it it goes into this. John Judge made cryptic remarks about Jaworski involved with the Red Cross business. Jaworski was president of the American Red Cross. So there's a reason to be suspicious, although this is no real documentation. Unfortunately, John's dead, because the minute I started doing this, I would have been calling him, saying, John, what the hell did you mean by this? You know? Anyway, all right, where do we go from here? Let's see. In the article that I've written, I didn't want to go in it because I'd be writing a book, but I put all the suggested reading on all of these issues that I just mentioned. Okay, now, we want to, where am I going here? Oh, I see what I've done. Hold on, I snuck a couple of inserts in. Bear with me for a second. We got to move up here now. And how much time do I have?
Ed, good question.
Yeah.
How much more do you need?
Oh, I'll just go until you tell me to stop. I don't know. I'm just getting started.
Well, let's say about 20 more, okay? 20 more minutes?
Okay, I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
I don't know. Hard to do. Once we move up into the 60s here, it's interesting, the people that Jaworski's friendly with. Sarah Hughes, who is the one that swears Johnson in on Air Force One. I'll tell the story briefly. Sarah Hughes was a judge in Texas, and Lyndon wanted to make her a federal judge, and the Kennedys said, no, she's too old. They wouldn't do it. And Bobby Kennedy was trying to get certain bills through Congress, and Sam Rayburn wasn't putting them in. And so Bobby went to Sam Rayburn and said, why aren't you putting these bills in? And he said, as soon as you make Sarah Hughes a federal judge, I'll put the bills in. So they made her a federal judge. Well, now Lyndon is pissed beyond belief that the Speaker of the House could get something done, but the Vice President couldn't. So when he's President of the United States, he picks Sarah Hughes to swear him in on purpose. That's gloating. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he used to beg Lyndon Johnson to let me take Air Force One. And Kennedy said, that's my plane, that's not negotiable. It was now his plane. He didn't get on Air Force One by accident. Those are two gloating accidents, things that happened at the same time. And in George DeMore and Shield's address book, it's under her name, Sarah Hughes, it says, quote unquote, she knows. Okay? You can figure that out. He was also friendly with J. Eric Johnson. If you want me to quote J. Eric Johnson here. This is the House Select Committee on Assassination. J. Eric Johnson ends up being the mayor of Dallas. They named the damn library after him down there in Dealey Plaza. This is the House Select Committee. What a bunch of cowards. Although from other sources, Jerry Bruno, the advance man, is cited, there is information that Johnson worked closely with Governor Conley in implementing the governor's specific plans for the Dallas visit. Johnson portrays his role as peripheral and does not recall any incident personally directly contributing to the outcome of any aspect of the trip planning, scheduling, or security. He even denied having discussed with the governor the security factors involved in the selection of the site where the president was to have given his luncheon speech, because Bruno wanted the women's building and Conley wanted the trademark, and that made him take the right angle turns. And Johnson was part of the Dallas Citizens Council who forced the turns. In fact, Johnson, again, in direct contradiction to other sources, stated that the trademark had already been selected when he entered the picture. So they know he's guilty, and they didn't do anything about it. Friends of Leon Jaworski, you are judged by the company you keep. And Bill Moyers is the same way. Moyers doesn't even, they sent Bruno home because he was fighting with Conley. They sent Moyers down. Moyers went along with Conley, and when the House Select Committee got to him, Moyers doesn't remember having anything to do with this. In fact, he could not remember whether he had even visited Dallas. So they knew he was guilty. It's unbelievable. Okay, then we get to May of, somebody say something? In May of '61, Jaworski writes his first book of memoirs after 15 years, in which he talks about how wonderful he was as a prosecutor in Germany and how all the other prosecutors the Nazis made them look like monkeys, quote unquote. So in May of '61, Vice President Lyndon Johnson writes the introduction to Jaworski, saying he's better than sliced bread. One time he was getting an award at a Houston Rotary Club, and Johnson shows up and does a little speech saying how wonderful Jaworski is. Of course, Jaworski helps him. He wins the state Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court, and it makes it so that Johnson could run for Senate and Vice President at the same time. So they loved each other. Quid pro quo here. He thought about making him Attorney General. He thought about putting him on the Supreme Court, but Jaworski was making too much money in Houston, so he didn't want to be under Lyndon Johnson's thumb like that. He actually says, I didn't want to have to do everything that Johnson wants me to do. So Kennedy gets killed, and Oswald's arrested. And the day after the assassination, the day after the assassination, Robert Story, Jaworski's best friend, over in Germany, okay, he calls H. Louis Nichols, the president of the Dallas Bar Association, and says, you ought to go visit this guy Oswald, see what he's saying. See if his rights are being violated. Yeah, that's what he's really interested in. He wants to know what he's saying. I mean, all the people who have studied everything about Oswald, involved with every agency you can imagine. And so Nichols goes over, and Oswald's a sharp cookie. He said, I want John Abt or somebody from the civil union there, and I don't want a lawyer from Texas unless I can get one who believes that I believe. So he wasn't saying anything. After he got back, Jaworski calls him. What was he saying? I'm going to do a speech in front of the American College of Trial Lawyers, and they're going to want to know what he's doing. Now, those two guys are already in touch with Johnson, and they're going to be part of the Texas Court of Inquiry. In fact, if Oswald hadn't been killed, they were going to be prosecutors they were misrepresenting themselves. They were already trying to find out what he was saying or not saying, okay? And Nichols' background is a little sketchy, too. He's in the Republic National Bank building, and just about everybody in Texas that's involved in this worked at the Republic National Bank building. DeWarren was there. Everybody and his mother worked there. I could go on for an hour about that, but it gives me 10, 20 minutes. At any rate, so that's the beginning of that business. Then what do we go to here? Since I'm going to run out of time, I'm going to jump ahead here. Even Connie Trammell, the woman that Ruby took to the Hunt office building the day before, she worked in the Republic National Bank building. Okay? She's also tied to one of the Kennedy assassination researchers, which makes me very suspicious, but I'm not naming that guy. Okay. Then when he creates the Warren Commission, Johnson, and he wanted Attorney General Wagner Carr, Robert Story, and Leon Jaworski to investigate the murder. And the guys in Washington are going, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly. You can't do that, Lyndon. So then he had to go with Earl Warren, and he wanted Allen Dulles to run it, but he knew that he couldn't have Allen Dulles run it. But in his autobiography in 1971, he said, I picked Allen Dulles and John McCloy at the request of Bobby Kennedy. Did you ever hear anything as absurd as that? You're going to be kidding me, okay? Of course, Bobby had been dead for 3 years, so he thought he could get away with that. And the day before the Warren Commission convenes, he gives John McCloy the Freedom Medal. So there's a quid pro quo, all right? And it should have been called the Dulles Commission because everybody else had jobs. Even the underlings had jobs. Dulles was the only one unemployed. And Walt Brown did a great analysis. As a full unit, they only saw 7.6% of the witnesses. Anyway, J. Gary Shaw, Walt Brown does a whole thing about, can you imagine Lance Ito getting up to have a smoke while the O.J. Simpson trial's going on? And J. Gary Shaw, remember him? He said, it is a fact that even in an ordinary case involving a chicken theft, all of the jury are required to hear all of the testimony before delivering a verdict. Amen. A little tribute to J. Gary Shaw. He probably doesn't even remember saying that. Anyway, so I have a thing here from a Boston Globe comic strip. When all was said and done, less was done than said. About this whole business. And of course, you have people like David Bellin and Alan Specter lying their tails off about everything. When Specter was thinking of running for the Republican nomination for the presidency way back when, and I was doing lectures at Harvard, BU, Suffolk, Bryant College, all over Massachusetts, and kids would ask me about Specter, and I said to them, if he becomes the Republican nominee for the presidency, and the Democrats nominate a diseased bear, vote for the bear. And even now, when people see me on the street, they recognize me, some of them yell out, vote for the bear! I still get that. Okay. Let's see, what do I want to do? Since I'm going to run out of time, and I obviously can't do... By the way, Robert Stories was in World War II, and his superior commander was General Charles Cabell. So there you go again. Okay, more of the same crap. One time, Robert Story called Johnson. I have the tape recording, and he's talking about the Warren Commission. He says, Mr. Johnson, just off the record. And Johnson goes, no. He wasn't going to fall into Nixon's trap. Shuts him off quickly. No off the record, shit on the tape. Okay? And his son was arrested, involved with mob people, Robert Story. That's interesting. He's supposed to be investigating mob things in the Warren Commission as a Texas Court of Inquiry. Okay, I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to just do the most important thing. And I do want to read the ending. I got a whole thing here on the FBI informant stuff, and the Warren Commission just covered that up. And it turns out that that FBI informant thing was a hoax anyway, but the Warren Commission didn't handle it right. Instead of subpoenaing the people, the writer and the people who knew about it, what they did is, we have a dirty rumor and we must wipe it out. And so instead of talking to the people who are behind the rumor, they brought in Hoover, and under oath, who was that? Was Lee Harvey Oswald working for you when he killed the president? No. Oh, thank God. And that took care of that. Okay, and I can go on for hours about that. And there was a CIA number, too, and that number was legitimate. And Earl Warren and J. Lee Rankin knew it was legitimate, that it could really be real, and they didn't even tell the other members of the Warren Commission. They just squashed it between the two of them. Incredible. Joe McKnight, my friend, who wrote Breach of Trust, a great book, goes into great detail about that. So now I want to do... I should do this. Joe Tonahue was a friend of Johnson's, Ruby's lawyer, beautiful. Talk about conflicts of interest. And Jaworski writes him a letter. And my friend Rick Russo said, it's incredible that Jaworski wrote this because he could have just called him and said it, and there'd be no record of it. But he wrote it. And the letter is saying, Joe, you're Ruby's lawyer, and do whatever you can to make sure that the Ruby trial is not televised. Hoover doesn't want it televised. Katzenbach doesn't want it televised. Okay? The former American College of Trial Lawyers president doesn't want it televised. The present president of the American College of Trial Lawyers doesn't want it. Now remember, we had mentioned that earlier. By the way, he was going to talk to that group about what Oswald was saying, but the meeting wasn't until March. It wasn't for 4 minutes. That's bullshit. That was just an excuse. Anyway, he says all these people, even people in Dallas, we've suffered enough, don't have that trial televised. Oh, poor Tonahue. He's going to do whatever he can to not have that televised. All right? Now, keep that in mind as I go a few pages ahead. I'm sorry I can't do everything I've got here. It all will be in S.T. Patrick's Garrison magazine, I guess issue number 10. You want to see all of it and everything I got, that'll be the place for it. Let me, and I'll just mention this as I'm going along. In his book, he rips the hell out of Marguerite Oswald. Marguerite Oswald knew more about who killed President Kennedy in 64 and 65 than any other Kennedy assassination researcher you can mention. The week after John Kennedy was inaugurated, she called the White House and said, I want to talk to President Kennedy. She called Dean Rusk. She finally was allowed to talk to State Department people. And she said, my son's in Russia. He's a government agent. And I haven't heard from him, and I'm destitute. And if he's working for the United States government, I want some money. And that shows you. And she knew that Fred Korth was guilty. She knew Bobby Baker and Billy Celestes was guilty. She knew an FBI agent named Joseph Schott was guilty. She knew Forrest Sauls, the Secret Service agent, was guilty. She knew Mike Howard, the Secret Service agent, was guilty. I can go in for hours about all of them. But she knew all that then. And this guy just rips her apart. Okay, let me do this, because this is important. And I should at least get this in, and I certainly want to read my last paragraph. I tried, people. I guess I needed 2 hours. Although, you know, if you want me to try to do some of this tomorrow instead of the Ruby thing, I'll be glad to do that. Anyway, let me get at it. One of the people in that letter that Jaworski said doesn't want the Ruby trial to be televised was Grant Cooper. Now, maybe most people don't know that name, but I knew it. That's Sirhan's lawyer. And he was under indictment for crimes, and he made sure Sirhan took the whole rap. I said, oh my God, I've linked Jaworski to the RFK assassination. Now, why that is important is I saw a film years ago of a conspirator involved in Robert Kennedy's assassination. And I sent that information to Sirhan, and he gave it to his legal researcher, Lynn Rose Manguin. And she called me and said, would you please send everything you have, the identity of that man, signaling before the shooting, and give it to Sharif, his brother. I did, and I never heard any more from them. And then I became friends with Larry Teeter, Sirhan's lawyer. And just out of the blue one time, he said to me, do you have any information on the assassination of President Kennedy and Leon Jaworski? It's like 2002, and I said, I got 10 pages on that, mother. I thought that was a lot. Now I got 95. And he said, can I have those? I said, sure. I mailed them to him. He didn't get them. I mailed them again. He didn't get them. He said, my mail's messed with. The next year, 2004, I think it was, I met him outside the George E. Allen building. And George E. Allen is involved. In fact, one year, I ripped the hell out of George E. Allen inside the George E. Allen building. I am that mouse. And I handed it to him. But within that year, he died. So I never found out what he had on Jaworski. And I don't know if what I just told you is what he had, but it was there. Now, what's important is I looked up the American College of Trial Lawyers. Okay? Let me read this to you. With Leon Jaworski's friendly association with Grant Cooper now confirmed, a quick search of their past shows that both men were former presidents of the American College of Trial Lawyers. Jaworski, 61-62, Cooper, 62-63. But just as disturbing, other former presidents include Albert Jenner, who wrote the Warren Report, 58-59, Joseph Ball, 67-68, and Lewis Powell, 69-70. 5 of them, all on the Warren Commission. And Lewis Powell's job was to protect Lee Harvey Oswald's rights, even though he was dead, and he did nothing. Okay? And then Nixon put him on the Supreme Court for doing such a great job. And so there you have it on that business. What else should I mention? I don't have time. If you want me to deal with it tomorrow, I will. What I would get, when I get to Watergate, the basic premise from the Watergate experts is, and it's interesting, the people who hate Nixon and the people who supported Nixon in this thing all dislike Jaworski. There's a unification there on both ends of the spectrum. And it basically comes down to the Watergate break-in was a setup to get rid of Nixon. They were caught on purpose, and Jaworski is brought in to do one thing, nail Richard Nixon. And he colludes with Alexander Haig to nail Richard Nixon, and John Dean helps. And he colludes with Judge Sirica to nail Nixon. Both ends of the spectrum. And then he leaves. And he leaves everything done. He doesn't fight the pardon. He doesn't indict him because he's losing money by not being at his practice in Texas. And then there's all these crimes that involve Nixon and related Watergate activities. The Dorothy Hunt plane crash, and I could go on for an hour about that. The shooting at George Wallace. The destruction of Spiro Agnew. And I'll just mention this. There was a U.S. Senator who had the goods on Agnew. And and Nixon and Agnew were saying, we got to get this guy off my back. And they bring Haig in. And the 3 of them are saying, we got to get this guy. And he said, well, I got a way to do it. He said, I got a middleman. And the guy's name is George Ball, B-E-A-L. But his brother, his older brother, is Glenn Ball. He's a senator, and we campaigned for him, gave him money. We're going to pressure the older brother to pressure the younger brother to drop it. So they do. They get a middleman to pressure the older brother to stop the younger brother, and the younger brother tells them to all go to hell. And Agnew's gone. Of course, the older brother did what he had to do, but the younger brother was honest. So they had to get one more guy to do it. You need a fourth guy to obstruct justice. George H.W. Bush. Jaworski, one of his best friends. George H.W. Bush and Lewis Powell become Jaworski's pallbearers when he dies. There's no way Jaworski's going to go there. And so Jaworski just buries all the court cases, all the things that Donald Segretti did. The Hunt crash, the shooting of Wallace, the Agnew thing, the ITT case, and there's dozens of them that just went right down the toilet because Jaworski left. And then Koreagate, he did the same damn thing. He did nothing. So I'll end with this, and if you have questions, I'll do the best I can. In fact, and also Agnew was threatened. One of his best friends told him that Haig threatened him. You better go quietly or else. And Agnew said, I know about murders that this administration was involved in. So Jaworski could have pursued Agnew and said, you want to get back? And they never did it. Okay, there's so much here. I worked my tail off for this thing. And then he gave very light sentences to all kinds of Watergate people. One of them he really thought was a wonderful man, Eagle Crow. He's the one that gave the $5,000 to break into Ellsberg psychiatrist's office. He's the one that covered up the plane crash as Undersecretary of Transportation, and he is the cog in Richard Nixon's Golden Triangle drug trafficking. But Jaworski thought he was a wonderful man and only gave him 4 months. And he did that with Kalmbach, and he did that with Kleindienst, and right on down the line. So let me read my last little thing here. And then in Watergate, the big crook was Tip O'Neill, and Jaworski was close friends with O'Neill, and he lit O'Neill off. And finally, and there's others, he's linked to Homer Thornberry, who puts Richard Case Nagel away. He's in association with Sheriff Stagel, who covered up the murder of Henry Wallace in The Guilty Men. Okay, so let me read this last paragraph. Ugh. See, this is my therapy here. This is my therapy. If the greatest lies are told in the name of truth, and the greatest crimes are committed in the name of justice, then the greatest sins are committed in the name of the Lord. Leon Jaworski's pulpit-pounding rhetoric and pseudo-virtuous judicial jargon were truly blasphemous. He was an enabled bully who exploited Lee Oswald's young widow from another country who could barely speak English and denigrated his heartbroken, poverty-stricken mother as a money-obsessed wingnut. He demonized courageous, patriotic researchers as delusional theorists. He secretly colluded with corrupt White House officials harboring hidden agendas and a self-aggrandizing judge to remove a president of the United States. He treated federally convicted felons as if they had committed petty thefts. He was a religious spouting demagogue who shamelessly judged Charles Colson as a born-again Christian fraud. He destroyed the lives of dozens of black American soldiers by deceptively manipulating the rules of law. He was an LBJ minion who contributed to the framing of Lee Harvey Oswald for murders he did not commit. Then he concocted a gluttony of self-indulgent, self-promoting memoirs about the sanctity of laws and morality by employing phrases citing God's guiding hand and praising Jesus Christ for his protection and blessings. Regardless of one's religious beliefs or lack of faith, we are all sinners, but there is a distinction between sinner and sinner. There is a hierarchy of sins. All sins are not created equal. For those who foolishly believe that somehow Leon Jaworski helped heal the nation through a series of political tragedies, then the road to hell and chaos is paved with good intentions. And Mr. Jaworski was wielding one of the major pitchforks in the process. And shame to all the other Orwellian creeps who aided or encouraged him in his disgraceful success for 8 decades. Thank you.
Questions?
Dan, how do you really feel about it?
The question was, Ed, how do you really feel about him?
I guess he's Lyndon John, LBJ.2. Huh? Really, I mean, it's amazing how Lyndon was able to surround himself with Bill Moyers, Cliff Carter, Jack Valenti, Leon Jaworski, and there were others. And they were all just amoral creeps. I mean, Bobby Baker and Cliff Carter named each one of them named one of their sons Lyndon. They were, well, I think that's the difference between Johnson and Nixon, is that Nixon's people jumped, first of all, some of them, he didn't do the break-in. He's guilty of the cover-up, so they got him. But they jumped ship, you know, it wasn't a loyal thing. But Billy Solestes went to jail. Bobby Baker went to jail. They wouldn't squeal. Of course, they were afraid of him, too, but they'd rather go to jail, you know. They didn't, you know, Bobby tried like hell to get Billy Saul to talk, you know. I guess the best way for me to end it would be, you know, they're all dead now, but Billy Saul used to say to me, some people need killing. And, yeah, I agree. I agree.
Let's give him a good hand. Thanks, Ed. Good job, buddy. Okay, well, it's been a long day, but I think a really productive day. I appreciate those who've been here. And, of course, we got another big day tomorrow, and looking forward to that.